Imagine a highly vetted, top secret cleared American intelligence officer stealing the nation's deepest secrets. Not by smuggling out stacks of paper, but by hiding them in a tiny micro SD card and a seemingly ordinary smartphone. This isn't a Hollywood spy thriller, it is the very real case of Kevin Patrick Mallory, a former CIA and DIA officer who was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison for conspiring to pass national defense information to Chinese intelligence. I'm Joe Daly, and this is the Daily Threat Report. Welcome to the podcast. Today we are joined again by Shawnee Delaney. Hello, Shawnee.
Hey, how are you, Joe?
Good. Shawnee is a former case officer with the Defense Intelligence Agency, an expert in espionage, and she's here to help us dissect the Mallory breach. We will be exploring the very human vulnerabilities that lead to betrayal, the covert communication device that made this espionage possible, and discussing why securing our most restricted zones now requires looking far beyond the traditional physical perimeter. Okay, to start us off, let's look at Kevin Patrick Mallory. Here was a man who had a long career as a case officer in the CIA and an intelligence officer in the DIA, holding a top secret clearance. Yet, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison for conspiring to pass this information on, this information for defense information onto China. Shawnee, from your perspective as a former case officer, how does someone with this level of vetting cross the line? What drives a trusted insider to betray our country?
So it's a tragic reality of CI or counterintelligence. The biggest vulnerabilities are often and pretty much always human, right? Mallory had a distinguished career, as you had mentioned, but by 2012, he had lost his clearance for improperly disclosing classified information, and he went years without a steady job. So by early 2017, he was drowning. So he was about $230,000 in debt, including over $12,000 that he was past due on his mortgage and $30,000 in just credit card debt. So he was a desperate man and he was watching his life fall apart. I think a lot of people have been there, really, right? So you've got foreign intelligence services, the Chinese in this case, and what they do is they look exactly for this kind of desperation. This is how they recruit folks, by putting their feelers out and by being attuned to people's motivations and vulnerabilities. So what happened in this case was a Chinese intelligence officer who called himself Michael Yang reached out to Mallory on LinkedIn, and he posed as a think tank representative. LinkedIn is very, very popular for these types of approaches. For a man facing financial ruin, the promise of a payout, eventually totaling only $25,000, was really just enough to make Mallory cross that line. And what I want to note also is that while he was drowning in debt and clearly had that financial motivation, you have to remember when you're looking at cases like this that it's not about the money itself, it's what did he need that money for? And we just discussed that in this case. So while most of us at some point in our lives, we've been struggling financially, right? We've all been poor students at some point. Mallory willingly put American lives at risk purely for financial gain. And there was not much, it just wasn't much money, right? When you think about it, for the penalty that he got. And I couldn't imagine as a case officer betraying the very country that you put your life on the line for by being an asset to an enemy.
What fascinates me about the case is the tradecraft actually used to steal and transmit the data. Mallory wasn't just relying on old school dead drops. The FBI found he was using a covcom, a covert communications device. Can you explain what this device was and how it was designed to evade traditional security measures?
Yeah, you're right. So case officers use it's covert communications. It's called covcom, and we use that to protect sources or protect operations and protect our own governments from exposure. So at its core, really, covcom is about moving high value information with the lowest possible risk that anyone ever see it or see who you're talking to or see what you're talking about, right? So we use it for lots of various different reasons. Things like protecting our human sources, our human assets, avoiding surveillance and interception, or maintaining plausibility or plausible deniability, reducing the need for risky meetings, compartmenting sensitive operations, controlling the time or the place or the volume of communication. And Mallory's covcom device is a perfect example of how espionage has really modernized. See, Chinese intelligence, they did not give him some clunky, obvious spy gadget like you see in the movies or in the International Spy Museum. They gave him a Samsung Galaxy smartphone during a trip to Shanghai. Just a phone, normal phone. So Mallory was trained to use it specifically for private communications with his handler. Obviously, they had outfitted it with some covcom stuff. So it had both normal and secure messaging modes, and it was supposedly designed to permanently delete message history. So using this phone, Mallory securely transmitted at least 5 classified US government documents, including one that exposed the unique identifiers of human sources who had helped the United States. That's, for me, is, again, as a former case officer, that is terrifying. That makes my stomach drop. But then going back to his motivations, the FBI actually recovered a text that Mallory sent on that very device to his handling officer saying, your object is to gain information and my object is to be paid for it, right? It shows how that motivation really plays into how he was recruited.
So, just a quick question: unique identifiers of humans, like that's the kind of stuff that puts people's lives in danger.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We are entrusted to keep these people and their families safe because they are passing us sensitive information.
That's crazy. This brings us to a critical physical security issue. Mallory had to get this classified data out somehow, and we know he scanned secret and top secret documents into a micro SD card at a FedEx store, from what I read. In your experience, how easy is it for malicious insiders to bring unauthorized everyday items like a smartphone or a tiny SD card into restricted zones where classified material is processed?
I hate to say this, but it is terrifyingly easy. And it's one of our biggest nightmares, especially for facility security managers today. Now, think about it. Everyone can imagine an SD card. I was just looking, I have SD cards right here. So this is an SD card, right?
Mhm.
But a
Yeah.
micro SD card is just a tiny, teeny little piece of that. So imagine, it's about the size of maybe a tiny fingernail. So imagine how easy that is to hide. So
Mhm.
after scanning those classified documents onto one of these little cards at this FedEx store, he hid it so well that even after he was arrested, FBI agents had to conduct a really thorough search of his home just to find it carefully concealed. And please don't forget that as a case officer, he had training and experience in how to do this really well.
Yeah.
Looking
He,
at
he,
this,
he
sorry,
knew where they were going to look, how they were going to look. I mean, he was.
yeah, I mean, you're trained at doing that because when you're a case officer, you're operating against, our enemies and we don't want them to find it. So if you're doing the same thing at home, he's going to know where to hide it.
Yeah.
But what I want to also point out is that when you look at this from an operational or organizational standpoint, rather, when someone has authorized access to a facility, they're relying on these organizations are relying purely on visual inspections or the honor system, and this is truly a losing battle. You've got tiny electronics like micro SD cards or even powered down smartphones that are virtually invisible to any traditional security perimeters. And with devices as a whole, Joe, every device nowadays seems to be connected to the internet or to a cell tower. They are getting smaller, they're getting more pervasive, and thus they're really much harder to spot.
Feels like the front line of facility security has completely shifted. It's no longer about guarding the perimeter with gates and badges and guns and pat downs or whatever. It's about what electronics are crossing that threshold. If adversaries are equipped or equipping insiders with customized smartphones designed for espionage, how will government agencies ensure these devices don't get in? How will they secure sensitive areas?
It's hard, right? This is a hard problem. The paradigm has to completely shift from the security barriers to digital and even frequency awareness. So, kind of like you mentioned, right? So, we are surrounded by streams of ones and zeros all day, every day, with all of the devices that we are surrounded with our phones and our laptops and our Ring cameras and our garage door openers, everything that is around us. All right. And so, it's really easy to hide in plain sight among all of that chaos. And like you mentioned, these devices don't care about the guards or the gates or the guns or the badge readers. They go right through. So you can have the tallest fences and the strictest badge readers. But if a cleared employee walks in with a rogue Samsung Galaxy in their pocket, like in this case, your perimeter has been breached. Agencies and contractors, they really have to look forward. They have to evolve by controlling this invisible environment that we're talking about, the radio frequencies and the digital signatures that are inside their facilities. So the ultimate goal of modern counterintelligence, it isn't just catching a spy at the airport with cash in a bag like they did with Mallory. The goal is detecting that rogue device the moment that it crosses the threshold, well before that classified data is transmitted. These organizations, be it public or private, they have to stay left of boom.
Well, that's exactly the challenge we focus on here at Bastille, developing the technology that detect the presence of unauthorized phones, SD cards, covert transmission devices in restricted zones, even when they're hidden or powered down. In your expert opinion, how critical is implementing advanced device detection technology to stopping the next Kevin Mallory before he enters the data center?
I would say this is the gold standard, right? This is critical, and it is a mandatory layer of defense if you think you have something worth protecting. And I'm going to whisper, you do, right? If an insider decides to betray their country or to pay off their mortgage, what would their coworkers know? Would they feel safe to report concerns if they even saw any? So ideally, you have technology to catch things that humans can't. And then, of course, there's layers about training and awareness with the humans. But if the facilities housing those secret and top secret documents had advanced detection or device detection in place, systems that are capable of pinpointing even these powered down smartphones like we're talking about, or these micro SD cards, Mallory's espionage, it could have been stopped dead in its tracks beforehand. What I see is foreign adversaries, they are constantly weaponizing everyday technology to steal our secrets. And this is not just government. I'm like foot stomping here, right? This is the private sector as well, maybe even more so to a degree. The private sector, when you think about it, they don't have all of the mitigations in place that the federal government has, like the polygraph examinations and the thorough background examinations and the periodic reinvestigations, right? If we aren't deploying equally advanced, specialized detection technology to guard our restricted zones, we are leaving our front doors wide open, quite literally.
The Mallory espionage case serves as a chilling wake up call for facility security. When foreign adversaries are aggressively targeting financially desperate former U.S. intelligence personnel, equipping them with customized, secure messaging smartphones to steal classified data, traditional security methods are no longer enough. As we've discussed today, the ease in which an insider can sneak in a micro SD card or a powered down cell phone into a top secret environment represents a massive modern vulnerability. To truly protect our most sensitive restricted zones, organizations must deploy advanced detection technologies capable of identifying those devices. And we have to do this before the data ever leaves the room. A huge thank you to Shawnee for sharing her incredible insights. Thank you very much, Shawnee.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And a thank you to our audience for tuning in. Stay vigilant and stay secure.